Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gabby. If you are new here, welcome. And I'm very excited about today's video because today we're going to be doing a yearly book wrap-up. I wanted to share with you guys my best and also my worst books in 2020 in case you guys are searching for some reading inspiration or you just genuinely love talking about books as much as I do. So I hope you really enjoy this video. Also, if you're not following me on Goodreads, I'll be leaving my profile link in the description box so we can be friends there and you can follow along my reading journey and also check out my full reading list for 2020. And with that being said, let's get started. So 2020 was a great reading year for me. I think it has been my best reading year so far. I read 20 books, 16 fiction and 4 non-fiction, and we're gonna get started with the best books of 2020. So the first book that I want to mention in this category is the only non-fiction that I have here, and that is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. This is a book about David Goggins' life, and I gotta say that this book is just a true inspiration. It is such a big motivator to get up and get going and get things done. So the book is about his life and he shares from his childhood up to where he is now. David Goggins was a Navy SEAL, he was in the US Army, he's done so many fitness challenges, and he's also been named to be the fittest real man in America. And I just gotta say that his whole life journey is such a source of inspiration and motivation for everyone. While I was reading this, I really started thinking to myself that my problems aren't really relevant. Like, nobody has time to think about that, and this book just really gets you going. The whole book is about how David Goggins has transformed his life. He had a pretty rough childhood, but he is such an example to everyone of just getting past those mental barriers that we put for ourselves in our minds and just cut the crap and be over with all of our excuses and all the sweet talking we tell ourselves of why we aren't really working for our projects and our dreams. And this book just gets you going. It talks a lot about mental toughness, self-discipline, and hard work. It also mentions how people only use 40% of their potential and how we're just sometimes wasting our lives because we are so comfortable in our comfort zone and we're just scared of moving forward and putting past all of these things and this inner voice that's always in our head telling us that we're not good enough, that we have this and that excuse for not doing what we really want. So this book, honestly, I think it was the first book I've read in 2020 and it was such a great start. I felt so motivated. I really thought to myself that if David Goggins can accomplish and did everything that he did and how he pushed his limit to really work harder, I really can do anything. And this is what this book does to you. He tells you to cut the crap and just get shit done. So if you are looking for something like this, even if you're not so into the self-help books, this book is just very straightforward. It's the story about this superhuman, and believe me, you're gonna be very inspired. So just do yourself a favor and go get yourself this book. Also, if you have the option between the real book and the audiobook, I definitely recommend the audiobook. The audiobook is narrated by David Goggins himself, and also after every chapter there's a small interview which I felt was more enriching to the whole book experience, so I definitely recommend. The next 3 books I want to mention are in the mystery thriller category, and I gotta say that this is one of the things that I enjoy reading the most. I love a good thriller, I love a good mystery. It just really enjoyable, and it's a great way to kind of like escape and just be entertained by a really good story. So the second book that I want to mention is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. So this is actually the author's debut novel, and the story is about this woman. She's an artist, she's married to this guy, and they have the perfect little life. And one day she goes crazy and shoots her husband, and not only that, but she stops talking. So the book is about this doctor who is trying to figure out what happened to this woman. Why did she kill her husband? Why isn't she speaking? So overall, the whole premise of the book I found was really interesting, and I gotta say that there's just a twist and a surprising ending that it's gonna leave you hooked, and it's gonna leave you with your mouth wide open. I really enjoyed it, and you know what I really love about a good thriller and a good mystery is when you get surprised and you didn't see it coming in your head. So I definitely didn't see this ending coming, and it was super enjoyable. I really recommend it. Really, really good book. The next book that I want to mention is Pet Semetary by Stephen King. I gotta say that this book was just such a ride. So I've had seen the movie, the latest one, and I was a bit hesitant about reading the book or not, but honestly the book goes very different from what the movie is about, so I didn't really have any problem with it. I wasn't really bored, and I was really invested in the whole story. The story is about this family who move into this new little town, and they have a cat, and something happens, obviously from the title, you know that it's related about pets, also about death, and I really love how this book was so deep into family life, love, death, you know, life after death and all that. It really gets you thinking about, you know, to what extent would you go to have a loved one alive, and I gotta say that this book just creeped the hell out of me. I really felt that I was, you know, one of the books that has scared me the most. I was creeped out by this book, and I had nightmares about this book. I went in the bathroom in the middle of the night and then just suddenly thought about a scene in the book. It was insane, but at the same time so worth it. Such a good read. Definitely because of this book I understand why Stephen King is so popular, because it was a little bit horrible. Like, it was a lot of horror, a lot of tension and mystery, and just wanting to know what was going to happen next. So I super recommend it. I really, really enjoyed this book. So the next book I'm going to talk about again is by Stephen King, and that is Misery. So this book is about this famous author who writes some romance novels and has a series of books, and then there's this woman called Annie Wilkes, and she is the author's biggest fan. This is all I'm gonna say because I don't want to spoil the book for you, but I was again super invested in the book. I felt that the writing was astonishing, and I really liked how this book is more of like a psychological thriller, and it talks a lot about addiction and mental health, and you just want to continue flipping the pages to know what's gonna happen, how is the story gonna end. Again, a great book by Stephen King. Definitely recommend it, and it didn't give me nightmares, and I was very happy about that. So the next two books I want to talk about are in the romance genre, and the next one is The Bride Test by Helen Hoang. So this is actually a sequel of a book. The first one is The Kiss Quotient, but you don't really have to read this book to read the second. They are completely different stories, just related in, you know, some minor aspects. I gotta say that I really enjoyed the first one, but it was a bit too cheesy for me, but The Bride Test definitely was the perfect level and amount of love and romance I searched in a novel without being too much. So this story is about this guy, and actually the interesting thing about her stories is that their main character is autistic, the same as the author, so it's a very enriching experience to kind of understand more what goes in the head of an autistic person and how they process things and relationships and all that. So I found that super interesting. And the story is about this guy. He is super successful, but he obviously doesn't thrive with personal relationships, and his mom is in the lookout for a wife for him. So she goes all the way to Thailand boyfriend and finds this perfect girl, brings her back home and introduces her to her son in hopes that they are gonna fall in love. So I really enjoyed this book. It was such a fun read. I finished it really quickly. I was very invested in the story and I really was rooting for both of the characters, which is something that it's really important in a romance. And I loved that it was from the perspective of a guy and not a girl. And I also really liked that the female character was very strong, very independent, very powerful. So I really loved this romance. Again, it was such a fun read, very educational and from a very different perspective. So I definitely recommend it. And now the next book and the final book on this category is Travesuras de la Niña Mala by Mario Vargas Llosa. And I read this in Spanish, obviously, but the book is actually translated in English as well. It's called The Bad Girl, and I just want to say that I'm not a fan of the title, and I think that the title just makes the book sound so cheesy, but I loved this story so much. So if you're not into romance, don't worry. This is actually the perfect book for you because I feel that this book really shows a very different face of romance and of love. You know, it's not perfect and cheesy and just happy ending and all that, but it's super realistic, and I love that, like I said, it presents a different side of love and relationships that you don't always see, and that is very much real. And also it doesn't make love any less than what it is just because it didn't end up like a super happy love chick flick movie. I found it was so enriching. This book is about these two high school sweethearts, and as life goes on, they go and take different roads in life, but as time passes by, they keep finding each other. Their roads intertwine and they end up meeting in Paris and also in different countries of the world. And I just really enjoyed this book. The writing of the author was absolutely amazing. I also really connected with the characters because they also mention a little bit of the expat life and all of these feelings that you get when you don't live in your home country. And overall, I really enjoyed this book. Like I said, I think it's definitely a piece of art, you know, a work of literature. I definitely recommend it. If you're looking for a romance and you just don't want to end up melting in a pile of sugar, this is what you're looking for. So for the worst books that I've read in 2020, the first book that I want to mention is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. So I read this book because it was Halloween. I was very into the horror genre. I wanted to read, you know, spooky things. I wanted to read about haunted houses, and I grabbed this book. This book was written in 1959. So when I grabbed this book, I was really hoping to be horrified, you know, and it definitely didn't do it for me. This book is about a haunted house, about this group of people who go into this house and it's supposed to be haunted and they want to figure out, you know, what's going on in there. But yeah, obviously horror has evolved since the time this book was written, and this is supposed to be one of the most scary books out there, and it obviously wasn't for me, and I think it isn't for anyone, and that's why it's one of the worst books I've read in 2020. So the next book I want to talk about is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. So overall, this book just didn't do it for me. The story is about this group of friends who are going to this Irish island because one of the friends is getting married and someone is killed there, and they're trying to figure out who. And though I'm putting this book as one of the worst of 2020, and I'm about to tell you why, I want to say also that the whole story is really entertaining and you do want to figure out what happened, and you know, you want to go to the end, so it does keep you moving, but I just didn't root for any of the characters. So I didn't like any of the characters in this book. I felt that they were all just really horrible, selfish people. So the last book that that I want to talk about in this section is the Burnout Generation. And this is actually a book I listened to in Audible, and the reason I am putting it here is because I started listening to it expecting a book, and instead I got a bunch of interviews, which was just not what I was expecting for. I was hoping, you know, for some just content and just a normal audiobook, but overall I feel that the content did make me think a little bit more about burnout and how I perceive and how I see burnout in myself and in other people, and how it can be totally different and still be burnout. The book doesn't really talk a lot about solutions, but it does kind of help you shift your mindset a little bit about how you see it. And that is it, friends. Those are my best and worst books of 2020. So I hope that you liked this video. I hope that you got inspired to read, and I would love to know which was your best and worst book of 2020 as well. So please leave me a comment in the description box. I would love to know what was your favorite book of 2020. And with that, I leave you. I hope you really enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so I can see you around in a future video. Bye!